warm welcome to you all. Our guest tonight is Nabiilah Fakira. She is a neuropsychologist, and tonight, during this episode of One on One, Nabiilah is going to explain to us the causes of depression and the ways to overcome it. Nabiilah, thank you so much for joining us in the studio of the MBC.
Thank you, Koyal, for inviting me.
Nabiilah, depression is a word that we hear very often. It is a word that we use to describe a bad day, an overwhelming situation, but those who suffer from depression know that it is much more than any one word could describe it.
Yes,
What is exactly depression about?
actually, we use this word depression to describe sadness, but in reality, depression is a medical condition that affects the way we think, the way we feel, and the way we behave. So it's much more than just being sad. It has a lot of implications to it.
It's not something that happens instantly.
Yeah.
There are many events that lead to someone being depressed. What are the causes of depression then?
There are different causes of depression, as mentioned. There is the biological aspect, the psychological aspect, and the social aspect. But in most cases, all the genetic, biological aspect, social aspect, and psychological aspect combines together to give rise to depression. I'm going to give you an example. We all know that we have certain genes in our body that predispose us to certain disease. So a depression also, there are certain genes that are responsible for it, but it's not like will develop by itself. So when it interacts with the environment, it activates that gene, and then we develop depression. We are more predisposed to develop depression. We call this epigenetic. Other factors is we are exposed to chronic stress, chronic adversities, which causes a disbalance in our biology, in our brain, and over time we tend to develop depression and severe depression depending on the types that we are experiencing. Other factors are health conditions such as basic examples, thyroids, things like that, that predispose us that as a symptoms we tend to develop mental health conditions, and in most cases it's depression. So there are different factors that causes depression.
But are there different types of depression?
Yeah, actually there are 8 types of depression, and but why 8 type? Because different people in different contexts having different symptoms, they will be put into different categories of depression. So the first one is the very common major depressive disorder. That's what the most people talk about. The other one is a persistent depressive disorder, where it persists over time. The other one is seasonal affective disorder, and a very common one after delivery, birth delivery, women tend to develop depression, or women experiencing PMS, sorry, after having their meds or before having their meds. Usually it happens. Or psychotic depression, where depression is accompanied by psychotic features, or bipolar depression, or even atypical depression. So all 8 different types of depression, just to mention that it's not just a simple concept. It's very complicated, and you have to do appropriate diagnosis to know which type of depression we are going through, and what type of treatment is more appropriate for this.
We normally see that mostly adults suffer from depression, but can children be also impacted by this issue, by this disease?
Actually, there's a lot of research now that come forward saying that mental health issues also affect children equally as it affects adult. But obviously, the symptoms is different because children, they don't express themselves as adult will, or they don't experience things as adult will. So the symptoms manifest differently in children, but it also affects them definitely.
So, what are the signs and symptoms of depression in adults or even in children then?
So let's talk with according to adult, because that's more straightforward. As compared to children, there is kind of changes happening. So adult is if you have a persistent low mood for more than 2 weeks, if you feel hopeless, if you feel helpless in certain conditions, loss of all interest, not eating properly or overeating, not sleeping properly or oversleeping, suicidal thoughts coming in mind, chronic fatigue, and underlying health conditions accompanied, such as gastric issues, chronic headache, all these physiological symptoms. So then this is the main assessment that we do to know if a person is going through depression first. And then we're going to do further assessment to know which type of depression it is.
You are a mental health coach, a neuropsychologist. How common do you find depression here in Mauritius?
Actually, a lot of people will have tendency to tell you the moment they feel something is wrong, because depression is the most talked topic, they would tell you, oh, I'm depressed. But actually, it is not always the case. When a person tells you that they are depressed, they are suffering from depression. Sometimes depression co-occur with other conditions. So I would say it is common, yes, it is very common with the modern lifestyle that we are living, but it is also co-occurring with certain conditions. So yeah, many people will suffer from it more, but further, we can't just say that a person is sad so they are depressed. There needs to be proper investigations.
Sometimes maybe people misunderstand that depression is same as sadness. It's
Yeah.
not, right?
No, because depression is a disorder compared to sadness is just a state. A state, you can change it if you have the proper tools, a proper coping mechanism. However, depression, sometimes even if you have the proper mechanism to cope with situation, because your body is doing some tricks to you, your brain is not operating to a proper level, to a proper efficacy, we can say it like this. Sometimes it's difficult to change it by yourself or easily.
So how is it diagnosed? Can you identify yourself if you are depressed or not?
Actually, you can identify some signs of being depressed, but for a proper diagnosis, you need to go to a professional, and these professional we use, for example, if they are doctors, psychiatrists, clinical neuropsychologists, they are going to use a DSM-5, the new version, or they're going to use the ICD-10. These are the two diagnosis manual that we use to make a diagnosis of any given mental health conditions. And accompanied to that, it is also important to use psychometric tests, as these psychometric tests will tell you the intensity of the dysfunctionality.
Do you think there's still some stigmatization around this topic of depression? People
Absolutely.
are afraid to come out and say that.
Absolutely. As any given mental health condition, people are afraid to talk about it. Why? Because it manifests in terms of behavioral. It's a behavioral manifestation. Like the symptoms, people will tend to withdraw from social gathering. The behaviors, as people will mention, is quite weird. Especially those with psychotic symptoms, where they will hallucinate, they will see things, they will hear voices. So people tend to be afraid of these physical symptoms, even if they are experiencing it, or they find someone else having it. So this is why there is a lot of stigma associated to it. Especially if you look at media before, they would portray people like having those symptoms as being mad. So now this is why we tend to stigmatize.
Very stereotype image, right?
Exactly. But what is important in the modern society to know that it's very common. Anyone in the society have the will maybe develop depression. It's not something that I can tell you, Koyal, you won't get it in your life. It's not guaranteed. So because we are all exposed to such probability of getting it, we shouldn't be stigmatizing it. We should be openly helping people, openly understanding people, and not just say that, oh, you are having those chronic fatigue, you are just lazy. So we have to start breaking the chain.
But now with the advent of social media, do you think that there is some portion of the population who are now aware of the mental health and are being more open-minded in how to deal with it?
Yes, they are, but as you know, if it's media, there are a lot of information. Some informations are correct, while others are not so correct, not so reliable, and that's the danger. And that's a message to the audience. Whenever you're looking for something, it's good to do research. First of all, just learn. Don't diagnose yourself. And I find a lot of people, they are on social media, they just scroll and then they fit themselves in boxes, and then they tend to induce these symptoms in them. Like they read about it, they start thinking about it, and they start feeling it. So then it's a pseudo. You are not feeling it, you're just imagining it, and your body is sending different type of signals. So if you are educating yourself, make sure that you are educating yourself through reliable sources like journal articles and reliable sources through websites, etc., and not just on social media.
And in what ways can someone cope with depression?
Actually, there are different facets to deal with depression. It starts with a good family support, friends support, medical support, psychological support, and just having a balanced lifestyle. We are going to go a bit more details about the psychological and medical combination treatment that's available. But I would say if you feel that you are going through a depressed phase, don't wait until it's too late to go and seek help, because then gets, I'm not telling you if you wait then you won't get treatment. No, you will, but the treatment is going to take longer as compared to you address the matter at a very early stage. It's easy to deal with.
So there are different stages of depression.
Yes, there are different stages of depression, there are different intensities of depression, there are different types of depression. Sometimes you will get a person just having those major depressive disorder, as we say, the most common one, but it remains untreated. The intensity amplifies, and then the person starts having psychotic features accompanied, and they start having anxiety accompanied to that. So then it becomes more complicated to treat. I'm not telling you that it's difficult, it's impossible to treat. It just becomes more complicated to treat. So this is why it's very important. If you feel that after 2 to 3 weeks you are not feeling well, things are not going right, seek help. At least talk to someone about it.
Nabiilah, can our nutrition, the way we eat, our behavior, our normal routine affect our mental health?
Absolutely. You will see that before we were not so much talking about depression, etc. We say that it's a modern illness, mental health. It's because there's a lot of changes happening in our routine, a lot of changes happening in our lifestyles. Now it's more hectic, we are eating junk foods more, we are relying on artificial, if we can say, stuff. So what's happening, it has an impact on our body. And one of my thesis and my research focus is on the link between our physical health and our mental health. So how does the gut and the brain is connected? So this is my area of focus, where I'm constantly doing research to investigate why does our nutrition, we have to pay attention to it, why it causes mental health issue, and if you have any mental health issue, are you more predisposed to have, for example, gastric issue and other conditions?
Okay, so since we are talking about depression, it's also linked with triggers. Triggers are in fact emotional, psychological, or physical events that cause some symptoms of depression to appear or even to return.
Mhm.
How are triggers related to unhealthy emotional patterns?
Actually, triggers. If the audience have been watching our episodes, they will understand that I talk about triggers a lot of time. Just to give you a brief explanation about it, triggers are basically things that happened to us in the past that has been recorded in our memory system, and that hasn't been dealt with in an appropriate way. So there hasn't been therapy, healing, etc. So what happened is stored in our hippocampus, in our memory, And then when there are things that is quite similar, or you just hear a name, or you just hear a sound, or you just smell something, or you're just been through the same environment, what happens? It triggers that memory. And when it triggers that memory, it also triggers a lot of thoughts associated to it. And when it triggers these automatic, most of the time negative thoughts, what happens? It affects our emotions and behavior. So it's just a cycle. When it affects the emotion and behavior, it also amplifies the negative thought. Now, the negative thought creates more negative behavior and emotion. So you would see that it's like a cycle that keeps on going. And as it goes, unless you break that cycle, you will start having the tendency to feel hopeless, loss of interest, and then you find yourself in a zone where it's very destructive.
In that sense, to manage the symptoms of triggers or even depression, it requires active and not passive decision making towards leading in better mental health,
Yeah.
right? So, what are the ways to navigate through depression?
Actually, first of all, is awareness. First of all, in mental health, it's not something that you can see it's happening. You can't see uh, the wounds, you can't say it, but you just need to be aware of the symptoms. So, how is just by reading about it, it's just by talking to professionals, listening to emissions shows like this, to educate yourself so that when things are happening to you, you can actually pinpoint it. I'm not saying that you should diagnose, but at least you should pinpoint something is wrong. And as you can pinpoint it, then you will know where to seek help.
And in today's hustle bustle, it's important to choose wellness. Share with us the small wellness actions that should be taken every day.
I would say eat healthy, sleep well, talk to a professional, monitor your symptoms, your behavior. If something is wrong, tell to someone, talk to someone. And also take supplements, take vitamins, take everything that's needed just to keep a balance between um, your physical health, your mental health, your daily routine. If you find you need to stop, if it's getting too much, you need to stop. You need to take a break. And to realize that we as humans, we are not robots. We are not artificial intelligent people. We have to take rest. We have to connect to people. We have to talk about it. So choosing wellness is a holistic approach. I can't tell you that because I'm a psychologist on a mental health coach only take care of your mental health. There's also the physical aspect, yoga, doing a massage, things like that. Take it very holistically. All aspects needs to be considered, needs to be taken into
It's
consideration.
important to take care of your inner self, right?
Exactly. If you find yourself, for example, having poor self esteem, not happy in your own skin, okay, it's normal sometimes. One day in a month you feel like this, but it can't be like every time you feel unhappy in your own skin, you don't feel comfortable talking, you just have those thoughts that you don't want to exist anymore. So this is not normal, and you should be seeking help.
Do you agree that it's also important to do some shadow work, like confront your fears, know what is bothering you instead of always
Mm.
having that optimistic mindset and evading from reality?
Actually, positivity doesn't mean that there's no negativities in our
Yeah.
life. It's not that I'm a positive person and there are only positive thoughts happening in
It's
my
how to
mind.
choose to respond to a negative
Exactly,
situation.
exactly. Actually, I'm gonna say this in this show very loud and clear that every human being on earth will go through adversities. It's undeniable that the amount of positivity that we're gonna have in our life, we're gonna have the equal amount of
Yes.
negativity. But the thing is that which one you choose to see. Is your filters working properly? Do you have the tendency to just focus on the negativity and ignores the positivity, or do you keep a balance? So that is important. This positive, an optimistic person will take both into consideration.
And Nabila, how might other aspects of our health deteriorate as a result of depression? What do people normally struggle with? Diet, sleep?
Yes, actually, people won't eat properly or will overeat, so which can lead to obesity. Others will have health conditions. For example, nowadays there are a link between mental health conditions and inflammations, mental health conditions and the gut health, mental health conditions with other symptoms, other severe conditions such as cancer, etc., etc. So yes, mental health condition, stress is a common denominator for many health complications. So it's very important to take care of both your mental health and your physical health.
So therapy then, is it a solution for depression? What research says about therapy?
Absolutely. Therapy, standardized therapy such as cognitive behavior therapy, narrative therapy, and other type of therapies have been proven to do some very positive changes to our brain. I'm in the field of neuroscience. When I was studying at King's College, every time we were studying how does therapy, specific technique, influence the brain anatomy positively. So we were doing therapy and then we were monitoring the brain through MRI scans. So then we could see the changes. So it's very factual, it's very scientific that appropriate technique, standardized technique, how they have a very positive impact on the brain. But sometimes it is undeniable that certain conditions are very severe. I'm not telling you that therapy by itself alone won't help, but sometimes the treatment is very long and the person doesn't have the motivation enough to go for it. So this is where in my studies, when I did my thesis, when I was studying there, one of the things that was more prevalent in such conditions were give them a combination of medical and therapy. So we put them on medication for a short period of time. Together we discuss with doctors, and then at the same time we as neuropsychologists we give treatment to them, therapy. So this combination were very helpful, and this is what we as modern professionals we are trying to implement in the country, in our island.
So can a depressed brain be restored? How long does it take to fully recover from that
Yeah,
illness?
that will depend on the patient, that would depend on the person's commitment, on the person's health. As I've mentioned, it's not just about your mental health, your physical health, it's also related to your environment, to your social environment, to the way you process information. So it varies from cases to cases. But if we talk about can the brain reset itself, restore itself, yes. Research nowadays are proving that the brain rewires itself. There are birth of new neurons, neurogenesis, neuroplasticity, structures in our brain changes after therapy, positive changes after therapy. Similarly, of the trauma, the brain changes. So the brain is the only organ in our body, or one of the organs in our body, that reconstruct itself, is always under construction. So if it can restore itself, yes.
Nabila, depression doesn't only affect those who are suffering from it, but it also has an impact on the surrounding, the family members. So
Yeah.
how can the close one help the victim to come out from that situation?
First of all, to realize that you can't judge someone because they have a particular symptoms or they are just acting the way. Don't say that, oh, you're always tired, so you're just lazy. So these judgment, they amplifies the symptoms of other people. They make the other people feel very guilty, and that just make things worse. So if you want to help your loved ones, just be understanding, understand them, don't judge, be compassionate towards them, because you don't know the battle they are facing. And I would say nowadays you have a lot of people, not nowadays, but it's normal. People won't tell you the moment they meet you, oh, I have depression. You don't know which battle the person is facing, so just be kind with everyone. And I'm not telling you to be overly kind and let everyone into your life and just give them everything. No, but at least be nice and then let them.
Polite.
Yeah, be polite. Exactly.
Dear viewers, we are actually drawing toward the end of this episode, but before that, Nabila, what's your advice to youngsters to encourage them to unleash more positive thinking and take care of their mental health in a much better way?
I would say to educate yourself, like be the ambassador of mental health. Each one can do this. It's not just my battle that I come here every month and talk. It's a battle of each and every one to learn about mental health on the net, talk about it, participate in campaigns, and break the stigma related to mental health and start normalizing the fact that people need treatment, and it's just like going to a psychologist, it's just like going to a doctor. A psychologist and a doctor are not two different persons. They are actually professionals in the field who are here to help. So just normalize this fact.
Thank you so much, Nabila, for being with us tonight, talking about such an important topic and just raising awareness about how to deal with depression.
Thank you, Koyel. Thank you, everyone.
Dear viewers, we have now come to the end of this episode. Thank you for your time. We hope to catch you next week at the same time, same channel. Have a great evening.